So is it still going to work, our plan of me saying when to go away from the screen?
Or is want, I can do that. Because this is what we've got. So we start out here. And we'll do our intro. And this is what everybody else will see when we're actually doing it.
Wow, that's really good.
So if you want, we can just switch to that when you have things you don't want people to see.
Okay, and then like I said, it's only going to be about a minute. Okay. Maybe a minute and a half. But
yeah, just let me know.
Cool.
So we're already up and streaming. So let's get to studio mode. And I can switch.
Oh, yeah. I'm not terribly worried about spoiling the dinner with my data I'm cooking. I'm sure as you know, if you have a big lunch, you'll go over and think that it's going to be dinner and you don't eat it. It's kind of an angle. Just a low key. Yeah, I'm cooking out the house. It's a Traeger. Robin here. Yeah, exactly. So I don't have to feel bad about missing one. Very little.
Shoot Brian an email.
It's like every probably. I haven't cleaned it once yet. We probably cooked on it 7 times.
Sweet. What was that?
The mic.
There's nothing you do where you really have to do this. My dad's had it for a That's some of the secrets that he does. Part of it is putting out a bunch of oil. So I'm going to take it all out.
But it was giving me a battery low and it was dying.
I don't think it's going to be a big deal. And the quality of the food is what worth the.
Is Darin going to be here?
I don't know.
4 or 8 hours.
I don't see anyone from them yet.
Brian was going to be here.
I thought
so
Brian
too.
or Ed would be here, but I haven't seen either.
It was a bit of a process. It was like 4 hours for the smoking
Darin,
and then 2 hours
got stuff
for
on your chin.
cooking, and then it's supposed
That
to
would
be
have been really
4 hours.
You're good.
Hey, John?
Yes.
Caramelize. That's the only thing I cooked on there that I kind of felt like it wasn't really worth it. In the oven, yeah. So I don't think I'll be good. So that was 8 hours of there's also a cost to that. It's not like the sous vide where you throw away the water. You know, it's like you have to buy the pellets, and 8 hours of the pellets is, you know, it's not free. It's not necessarily expensive. And if they were,
Whatever.
That's what
you cook it every time that way. It's just the amount of quality that I got for the time that it took, the pellets that it cost, the effort.
Peter does not like that.
Yes, you do guess that.
Oh, yes. Oh, they
There's
did.
only a couple of us when I have like some things for bringing in, no problem.
Is it the same? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really
But snakes on that thing, oh my gosh.
Alrighty, we'll go ahead and get started. I know we at least have one person on the live stream, so we'll get started with that. We'll give people a few minutes to get some food, so no rush there. Go ahead and feel free to eat. Just like to welcome you out today to our meeting for this month. We're going to be talking, we have a guest speaker from Darin Dickey from the LDS Church who's going to be talking to us today. Also, a few caveats. I know it was requested that I know the LDS Church is looking for developers. Is that correct, Darin?
Yes.
Okay, so if you're interested, go ahead and contact myself or anybody in the committee, or Darin, if you put this contact information up, and we'll get you connected with that. Also, I know there are a few other companies around. I know Zach, and I'm sure Journey Team are looking as well. So if you're interested, we have plenty of if you're looking for a job, we have plenty of resources available to you. That being said, our meeting today is sponsored by Journey Team. Other than I don't see any of them here today. So if you see them, tell them thank you. We do have some nice food back there. So go ahead and get settled. We'll give about 5 minutes, and then we'll get started with the presentation. So.
Testing. Can you hear that at all? Is that okay? So I'm ready whenever. Do you want to start? You didn't see Brian out in the hallway or anything? If he comes in, I can always pause and let him say whatever he needs to say.
Yep.
Let me know when I'm good.
Good to go.
Okay. Welcome everybody. So I kind of want to get a feel for who we have here today. Do we have, now if I move around, is that a bad idea? Or do we need to kind of just stay in this space here? Okay.
As long as you're not standing in front of the screen, you're good.
Okay. So who here has something to do with SharePoint in their job? Okay, good. Good. You're the right meeting. Who here is SharePoint that does development in SharePoint? Okay, good. About half. Who here does SharePoint administration? Okay, a lot of the other half. Some crossover there. Some people can do both. Who here is a business person, project manager, my manager? Okay. All right, so just to let you know, this is going to be, the first part of my presentation will be geared towards the big picture. It will be kind of business oriented. And then we'll sort of pivot about halfway through and we'll go fairly technical. So that's just to set expectations. That's what we're hoping to accomplish here today. So let's start off. And the first thing I want to show is a little video to introduce my team. I got a couple of people here from my team, and maybe a couple more on the video. Through a video that we made to enter into a contest. This contest, was done by Intranet Reloaded, and the award ceremony was last night. They announced the winner last night, and I'll tell you who that was in just a minute. But first of all, let me show you the video that sort of introduces our team. and our product.
I work for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I am the technical product manager for intranet services. I take what's coming in from vendors, in this case it's Microsoft. I take the fire hose and I trickle that down into a nice flow, or I try to at least for our customers. So the very first intranet sites that were set up were over 11 years ago. SharePoint sites were they just crept up all over the organization, and I'm talking thousands of them. Any given user on any given day would access multiple sites, and they would look and feel totally different. The functionality was different, the color schemes, the themes, some were customized, some were totally out of the box. It was expensive, it was disjointed, groups weren't working together, they were all siloed, and then along came modern SharePoint. It's getting it into the hands of non-technical users. It's very configurable, you can click and drag and add components. We relate it as a big puzzle. The site is the puzzle, and these web parts in modern SharePoint are the puzzle pieces, and they're so easy to put together in their own layouts with their own functionality that users love them. So what we were able to do with modern SharePoint is take our organization's branding and apply it while still maintaining all of the out-of-the-box functionality. So everything had a consistent look and feel. So what we try to do is both consolidate and bring sites together into a modern SharePoint site, but also allow users to create sites and these engaging modern sites really quickly and efficiently. So there was a massive cost savings across the entire organization. So we found very quickly that users didn't need to engage professional IT services to build their sites. Modern SharePoint helped us to solve these problems. Our team is awesome, and they have handled this so well. It has changed how we approach building sites entirely, and they have knocked it out of the park. Thank you for your consideration.
I apologize for the choppy quality of that video. Actually, the video is really good. I think it has something to do with the way that we're streaming things here. But so we entered this contest. Then we and some of the other participants in this contest were people like Wells Fargo, Pfizer, Deloitte, Deutsche Bank. So some pretty big names. And last night, the committee met, everybody met. They're all in Boston right now, and they selected the winner, and the winner was, we took first place. So, we are super excited about that. We feel like we have a pretty good intranet. And today, I'm going to share with you some of the things that we've done that make our intranet one of the best in the world. So, I have some candy bars here, and so I'm hoping for some audience participation. And the first thing I'm going to do is see if you can read my mind. So I've been doing intranets for 18 years, almost 20 years. So the first time I created an intranet was at Zions Bank back in 1998. So yeah, almost 20 years. And you know, that was the first, intranets were brand new. Nobody knew what an intranet was, and we didn't really know what we were doing either. We built it on a platform called Lotus Notes, and some of you might have heard of that. But over the years, so I've done intranets a lot in my career, and I found that there are three pillars, in my view, of things that you need to have in an intranet to make it a great intranet. So these are three things, and obviously there's lots of things, right? But these are three things that I think, in my experience, that if you get these three things right, you can get some other stuff wrong. So let's see if you guys can guess three things. And if you guess right, you get a candy bar of your choice. So we have Snickers, Twix, Milky Way, and Three Musketeers. Okay, so yes.
Content?
Okay, good content.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's not one of the three, but that is absolutely essential. And actually, that plays into the three in a really important way that I hope will be obvious, but thank you. Yep. Yeah.
Consumer engagement.
Okay, getting people involved, finding a way to get people involved in it. So yes, that is a great answer. That is not one of the three I had was thinking of in my mind, but
Give us
you
a
can't read my mind. So. Yeah, go ahead.
Ease of navigation.
Oh, good. Okay, good. That's okay. So, what kind of candy bar do you want?
I think Snickers.
Snickers. Okay, that's my favorite too. Oh. Okay, so good navigation, and the way I'm going to put this in the pillar that I constructed is a good menuing system, good way to get around. So that's one. I'll give you a hint on one of the others. It's the topic of my presentation today. So. Who said it first?
Do rock, paper, scissors.
What kind do you want? Twix? Okay. All right. And the third one, yeah, you may or may not get it. We could be here a long time. Does anybody want to guess before I go on? We'll do one more guess. Yes, okay. What?
Consistency?
Consistency. That's really good. That's not one that I had thought of, but that is really good.
user interface.
User interface? Yeah, good. So these are all good. These are all important. And I'm not going to say the three things that I came up with are the correct things. Here's the three things I think are critical. If you get these three things right, and this goes back to the idea of content, that was your very first guess, right? You know, search and news, that's all about content, obviously. And so those are the three things that as we've developed this new intranet at the church, those are the three things that we felt like we had to get right. And it was okay if we got some other things wrong. And we'll fix those other things eventually. But if we can deliver those three things, then we will feel like we'll have a successful intranet. Okay, so we're going to dive down. Excuse me on some of these. Okay, so who here has used the modern news web parts in the new SharePoint experience? Okay. And use news in general in modern. So one of the complaints that I have is that Microsoft has yet to release a news carousel rotator. And actually what we're going to do today, we're not going to go deep into this, but I'm going to show you how to build a news rotator using the same sorts of things that we talked about for search. So let's show you the one that we did. Well, this is a lot smoother on my screen. It's a little bit choppy on your screen. I apologize for that, but you get the idea. That's the news rotator that we did. We feel like that's a nice, clean way to present your content. All right, Brian, do you want to take a minute now or later, or
I do when you're done either way.
This would be a fine time, or later. You decide.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
we are going to break with this discussion for just a minute while Brian Tenney comes up. He has.
Sorry I'm late, guys, but as a sponsor, we did have some kind of big news today. So I think most of you guys know Journey Team. We've been around the SharePoint consulting space for a while. 2 weeks ago, we finalized a merger with Sorensen Innovations. So you guys know, a lot of you guys have known Kip Sorensen and his company for a while. So we're pretty excited to have him as part of our team now. Just increases our expertise, our bandwidth, and our ability to deliver for our customers. So Sorensen Innovations and Journey Team are now one company. So I know you're still a little bit mad about it because you're going to have to find somewhere else to get bids, but it'll be good. So we're excited about it and always happy to support the community. I think this will just increases our investment in the SharePoint community in this space. Hopefully increase our ability to give back to the community, increase some resources there, and help us do more in the SharePoint space. So thanks for letting us sponsor, and good to be here, guys.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Brian.
Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, it's no problem. Okay. So that's sort of an idea of how a news rotator can look, how nice it can look. And another problem that we have with the news story so far is delivered from Microsoft. Who's heard of Hubs, or the News Hub? Has anybody heard of that? Has anybody actually tried it? Okay, good. Some. So we tried it, and we found it lacking in some areas and didn't meet our needs, and I'll show you why. So we have the Hub. The Hub for us is called Home. It's our intranet for the entire workforce. And then we have lots of areas and departments around the world who are also going to have their own sites out in Office 365. It's going to be their intranet sites. So the way the Hub works is information flows this direction. So you have this Hub site, and if you have a news web part on your Hub site, it's actually going to pull in content from different sites that are joined to that Hub site. And that doesn't work for us. We needed something different. We needed something just opposite of that. And so we went back to Microsoft, and we're part of the early adopter program. I talked with the product team at Microsoft and give them feedback. We said, hey, this doesn't work for us. We need it the other way around. We need this. We want content to be created at the home level, at the Hub level. We want it to go out to the areas and departments around the church. So in order to do that, now I think that's going to be built into the Microsoft product, maybe even soon, because I've given them feedback, and I know others have as well over the months. So I think maybe even as early as next month, we might get an announcement that there's been some great improvements to the Hub experience. But so far, it hasn't met our needs. So let me just show you an example of the news experience. Oh, you know what? We already watched that, so let's go back to the slide deck here. Okay, so here's another thing we didn't like about the Hub product. We thought that the Hub menu was flat. Okay, you don't have the opportunity to have different categories, and it's kind of boring. It doesn't look all that great. It's not categorized. You can't target. One of the things we need to be able to do is target our content depending on who you are, where you sit. So we may have content links in the menu that are only for people who work in the information technology group. We may have some that only work in the missionary group, some that only work in the temple group. So we need to be able to target our menu. So I'm going to try this live. Let's see how this goes. I have a backup of the video if it doesn't. So here is our intranet, or a demo version of our intranet. And so our menu looks like that. And let me, first of all, before I show you that, let me show you how bad. This is what you get with the Hub site. You get this flat menu. It's kind of boring. Doesn't look all that great. Can't target your links. You can add new links and stuff like that, but they're not grouped or anything. So then let's go back to our live site, and you can see our menuing system is all, I think it looks really nice. It's grouped, and we can target links based on who you are and where you are. Any questions about that so far?
Is that an extension?
So that part, yes. So that is an extension. That's an application customizer extension. That's how we're injecting stuff into the header. You'll notice that our header looks different than the out-of-the-box header that you get from Microsoft. We needed something. See these little light rays on the left here? That's very specific to the church. It's part of our brand. And so we needed something, some way to customize that area, but we didn't want to break anything. And so Microsoft, fortunately, has given us a really cool way, using extensions, to be able to influence what happens up in that header area, as well as the footer. So we needed some things in our footer, obviously our logo, and some intellectual property, trademark information. So we have the ability to, through the application customizer, using the extension, to be able to say what goes there. Good question. Any other questions? I think I saw another hand. Yeah.
What are you backing the data with for the menu?
Yeah, that's a great question. So where is that data coming from? So the way we did it is we have, if you look at the site contents, this is all driven by a list that we call navigation that gets provisioned as part of the application customizer that we use to do all of our branding stuff. This list is what drives the navigation. That allows us to be able to embed things, and it also allows us to be able to target things to certain SharePoint groups. That's not the only way you could do it, but that's the way we chose to do it. Good questions. Any other questions? Okay. Well, so the the main thing that we wanted to talk about, that I wanted to come here and talk about today, is where is the modern search web part? So if I go out to my site and I go and create myself a page, oops, I guess I can just do that from. So I'm going to say add a page.
Hey Darin, is this a hub site or a communication site?
So this is just a communication site. We are not using, is that a question from the internet? Okay. We are not tied into the hub site for our intranet. And that's because of all the reasons I listed earlier. Because the information flow was the wrong direction. We didn't feel like the menu, the ability to customize the menu was there yet. So this is just a communication site. This is not a hub site. Now, of course, any kind of site can be a hub site, right? Communication site, team site, whatever. You can turn it into a hub site. This is just a plain communication site. No hub site functionality at all. Okay, does that answer that question?
Yep.
All right. Okay, so I go to my page here, and I call this my search page. I'm going to take away that graphic there to give me a little more space. And I'm going to come over here to my possible web parts that I can add. And you'll notice, and this has been this way for a very long time, there is no such thing, not yet. I think it's coming soon. But right now, it's not there. You don't have the ability to create a search web part or a search results web part. And I think that's a huge, huge thing that an intranet needs in order to make it useful. So if we come down here to the bottom, here's some of the custom ones that we've created. And I can add LDS search results, and that's our search result web part. And we're going to look at that some more here in a minute.
So Darin, we had a question, let's follow up on that. For the fixed header and footer, are you guys changing the out-of-the-box headers and footers so they take up less space, or is that just?
Yes, that's how we're doing it. So like I said, I think Microsoft is going to come out with a search web part soon. Maybe next month. Maybe that'll be one of the big reveals at the SharePoint conference. I don't know that for sure. But even if they do come out with a search web part, the question is, well, what if my organization wants to do search differently than Microsoft? What if I want to show some results? I'm going to show you some examples of this from specific lists or libraries and mix that in with some other search. Anyway, so we'll start to look at that. How do I customize a search result web part for my organization? And that's what we're going to be deep diving into here. And so as we talk about how we did this at the church, I'm going to show you specifically how we did search, but you could also use these ideas, and we've done this. You can use the same ideas for how we did it to create a news rotator and other types of web parts. And you'll probably have some good ideas too as we go through this. Okay, so I'm going to give a little demo, a little bit more of a demo of what our search results web part does. Okay, so is it all right if we do the border thing now for a minute?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a search here, and it's gonna show some information that's actually live. And so there's gonna be some phone numbers come up here. So don't take any pictures, please, because these are real people. So let's say I did a search for Allison. So it's going to show me the people who are named Allison. It's also going to show me any kind of news and documents for that. And then I can drill down on this. And it's okay if you want to move this screen to show the screen. That way it's probably not high definition enough to actually see phone numbers.
And we're far enough away.
Okay, good. So you can see it does some really good, at the top of our search results, we get some people named Allison. But as we go down further, you start to see fuzzy matches, like Alice, and Allison with one L, and stuff like that. So, any questions on that so far? People search in almost every intranet that I've ever done that I can think of, maybe every intranet, is the number one thing people do, right? That's why you go out to the internet. You go out to find somebody. There's other things too, but people search, we knew we had to get that one right. Okay, before we get into the code stuff, sorry, let me do a couple more demos here, and let's keep it in the fuzzy mode for just a minute. So we wanted to be able, our search web part, I'm just going to come back here, and you'll be able to see, I'm going to search for, sorry. So I could do something, I could search for expense report, and I'm going to start seeing a lot more news and documents that relate to that. But I'm also going to see some things over in the service catalog here that we're going to look at a little bit into a little bit more detail. I could do a search for travel, and then I start to not only see news and documents and service catalog stuff, I start to see people who are in the travel department. So, and as I drill down on this, so let's click on that. I can change, my results type from people to workforce, and then I start to see this is sites and pages that related to the search term. And I can switch over to see files, and I can see files that relate to travel. And I can search over to catalog, and that shows you entries in our service catalog. So this example is something very specific to our organization. We want to be able to see things from the service catalog. So what is this catalog? I will show you. Sorry. Just one of these links. So our service catalog is kind of a way, we wanted to make it really easy for people to use our intranet to be able to find the different products and services that are offered by the departments of the church. So for example, if I want to get a new computer, if I want to book some travel, if I want to whatever, then I would use the service catalog to be able to do that. So I'm just going to do a search here, and you can see this is kind of a nice little type ahead search. So click on it. Type in mobile, and I can click on that, and then as I go down into it, it will show me the product offering or the service offering. And we wanted that kind of information to be surfaced in on our homepage through our search experience. Okay, any questions so far before I? So we're about to go 180 degrees into, we're all business, we're all big picture so far. Now we're about to pivot, and we're going to go super technical. So any questions before we start going super technical? There's a candy bar in it.
In that case, I'm very excited, Darin.
What kind of candy bars do you like?
But I have questions, but I think you're about to answer.
Go ahead, you might get a candy bar if you ask it now. Oops, sorry.
I'm assuming that you're tapping into like Delve and API Graph and stuff like that to get that information to surface back up again.
Right. Yeah, so we'll talk about what APIs we're going to use. That's a good assumption. We are using lots of different APIs, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on what those are.
So you're encouraging your users or the whole group to go to SharePoint for pretty much everything you guys are trying to do?
So the question is, are we encouraging everybody to come to SharePoint for all the stuff that we do? I don't know, Craig. So Craig, my boss, is here. Maybe he could be better at answering that kind of
when
question.
you say everything, you mean? Well, again, if you're looking for cell phones, if you're looking for certain things, they go into that, and there's where your recommendations would be.
Yeah, sorry, Craig, go ahead. Did you want?
I think that's true. We find people go there by default, just because they know, based on in the past their behaviors, to go to the intranet to search for that. And so we haven't really done anything to try to divert that. Delve was, something that we started looking at releasing to the organization and maybe encouraging a little bit more, but we're just still not sure where that fits in the
So
puzzle.
you can't make them do it, but it's a recommendation basically.
We're continuing that path. So.
Yeah, if there's anything we found is you can't make end users do
course
anything. You can even set their default browser and their default homepage, and
They're still going to do it their way.
that's right. They're only going to do it if they want to do it, and that's what we hope to provide, is something that they want to do. Like that this stuff is useful enough that they actually want to go out and
More than
use it.
anything, is ease of use.
Right.
Is the most important part, I guess, it would be, because I know with Sennheiser we go into SharePoint and they don't know what to find where.
Right.
And it's an issue with us, and kind of what you're doing is I can take some of those ideas back, but I don't know if we have anybody really working on the SharePoint, or they're just putting stuff on there, and even those that put stuff on there, there's times where they can't even find it. So that's what you guys are doing is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping to do, is especially as we focus on those 3 pillar things, that the search experience is good, that they get news that's relevant and that's updated, fairly often, that we have content in the news that's, interesting, and that they have a good place to go and find a link to whatever they need to go, whatever external system or internal to SharePoint. It could be either, right? It could be a SharePoint page, it could be a PeopleSoft page, it could be something, ServiceNow, it could be any kind of external system. We want to be able to find that quickly by using SharePoint intranet. Good, these are good questions. Do you want a candy bar? Would you like a candy bar?
Doesn't matter.
Choose? Okay. There you go. Sorry, Darin.
Darin had a few too many Wheaties this morning.
Right. Good questions, and thank you for the feedback. And please keep saying stuff so I know that you're interested and that you're getting your questions answered. So, like I said, we're gonna go technical now. We're gonna talk a little bit about how we did all these things. So we use the Microsoft recommended build tool change. We're using Visual Studio Code for our integrated development environment. That's where we do all of our coding and all that kind of stuff. We feel like it's gotten better and better. Frankly, I use it a lot more than I use Visual Studio these days. I don't know if that's true of the other developers in the room, but
Yeah.
I'm seeing some hands. So, right. So it's great client-side development tool. We use npm to manage our packages, and we use Gulp as our task runner. We use Yeoman as our scaffolding, the way we scaffold our projects, and we'll take a look and see how easy that is. And then we use Node.js as kind of to run our applications, to serve our applications in the development environment. But what we'll probably focus more on today is these 3 things. We use SharePoint Framework, and we've chosen to go the direction of React, and we use Office UI Fabric and the tools that are provided with Office UI Fabric React. And so we'll kind of go into those things a little bit. Any questions about our tool set or why we use those things? All right, so this is how easy it is to create a SharePoint Framework project these days. So I'm just gonna, and you guys, probably a lot of you have already done this. So we won't go through the whole process. I just want to show you how easy it is to get started. So I'm just gonna go up a level, and I'll make a directory for Utah SP user group, and go there. Oops. All right, so the way you do it is you say yo, meaning yeoman, and then you say which yeoman generator you want to run. So I'm going to run Microsoft SharePoint. You guys see that text? That might be a little too small. I apologize. How's that looking for the people on in the internet? Okay.
It's
A little bit fuzzy.
a little fuzzy.
Let's see if I can increase the font size a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to create a new solution. We'll just use the default same name as the directory that I'm going to put it in, Utah SP user. And I can target this solution to run in SharePoint Online only. In other words, you're going to get the latest and greatest stuff if you do it this way. You can also say, I want this package to run in an on-premise situation in a SharePoint 2016 environment. And if you do that, you're not going to get a lot of this stuff. Like, I don't even know, can you do extensions? If you choose SharePoint 2016, can you do extensions? I don't think you can do that yet. So yeah, that's not supported. So I'm going to, for this example, I'm going to choose SharePoint Online. You can say, where do you want to put it? I'll just use current folder. This thing says, this is kind of cool. We haven't actually done this, but I can see where this would be useful. You could say, I want my SharePoint admin to be able to deploy this to every site. So for example, how I can see it's using it at the church is we want analytics to be on every site, and we've developed some analytics stuff in a SharePoint framework solution. So I can see this being a good place to do something like that. I'm going to say no for this. And then you can say if you want to do a web part or an extension. Today's presentation is all about web parts. There's some really cool stuff about extensions that we could do another time. So the web part. Then this is the actual name of the class that you're going to create. So hello world, that's fine. We'll just use that and use that description. Then you can decide which framework you want to use. You can use no JavaScript framework. You can use React, which isn't a framework, it's a library, but you can use that. You can use Knockout. So for today's presentation, we're talking about React, so I'm going to choose React. And it's going to go out and do a whole bunch of stuff. It's going to basically, it's going to build your all the things that you're going to need for your solution, and then you'll be able to open that up in Visual Studio Code. Takes care of a lot of the complexity. All right, so why use React? Who's done React development here? 1, 2. Okay. All right. So full disclosure, I am not a React developer in the sense that I haven't been doing it for years and years and years. I'm fairly new at it. Also, I kind of prefer just plain JavaScript or Angular. But I'm starting to feel different lately, especially as we've done a lot of this stuff over the last few months with the search web part. I'm starting to kind of see that React is a pretty cool library. So here's some good reasons you might want to consider using React. Number one, you just saw us generate a project there. One of the options there was React. What was not one of the options for a candy bar? Angular was not. Okay, my boss gets a candy bar. He doesn't eat candy bars. He's healthy. Okay. Angular is not there yet. I think it's coming, especially with Angular 5 and Elements, but It's not there yet. You get to take advantage of UI Fabric React, which lets you do the UI Fabric stuff much easier and integrate it as part of your code. That's another pretty good reason. I found it was pretty easy to learn. I think it was easier for me to learn that than it was for me to learn Angular. Does anybody else feel the same way? Yes, no? I've seen some heads, okay. JSX, this is controversial. So the whole idea with React is that you have your markup inside of your JavaScript code files. And I did not like that at first. That was disconcerting to me. I do not like to mix my views with my code. But I kind of see why they did it. It sort of makes more sense now. And so, yeah, you know, this could be either way. This could be an argument either way for whether or not you choose to use React. I'm starting to come around. I'm starting to see why. There's lots of geeky reasons why you might want to use React, such as, anybody? Supposedly it's really fast, super fast, yeah?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say, is if you're going to Angular or any of those other two-way binding libraries, if you start getting very large pages, anything that has 80 listeners, 100 listeners, 120 listeners, the two-way binding really starts to bog down. I think in a lot of the times where we use like a SharePoint framework, like a web part, it's much more small, it's much more condensed, and you won't see that as much. But if you're doing big applications with lots of input forms, lots of listeners, lots of places where you can type or interact with it, then Angular starts to bog down, whereas React really never does.
Right, so the comment was that Angular starts to slow down a little bit. It's because of the two-way binding, it's not as fast. I've also found, sometimes I'm not sure what's going on with the two-way binding. Like I don't know when the digest is happening, and I don't know when the DOM is refreshing, and I don't know how to control all of that. The nice thing about React is it's one-way binding, and you have lots of control over when those events happen. So, any other good geeky reasons why you might want to use React? Facebook uses it. Is that good?
You can use it on your mobile too.
You can use it on your mobile, okay?
React Native.
Oh, good. Okay. So let's actually create ourselves a search web part, and I'll show you how easy it is. And we'll do that. How am I doing on time, by the way? Am I going to?
You're okay?
Okay. All right. So the first way you could approach building a search web part with React is you could put everything into one file. And this is sort of the default experience. So like if we come out to this this file or this solution that we just generated, and I say code and hit space and period, what that's going to do is it's going to open it up into Visual Studio Code. And you can see what it does is it throws it all, whoops, not there, it throws it all into one file with an associated TSX file. So that's one way you could do it. But I want to make the argument, whoops, that you may want to do something like this. This is sort of the strategy that I started to go down, and I even did it a little bit more. That you might want to, so I see the top level, this is what we call the parent, as being the place where you define the properties for your web part. So this is where, you know, when you go to edit a web part, let's actually go look at this. So if I go out here to my site, and I edit a web part, and nobody else is editing it at the time, sorry, we'll go to a different page. Okay, so if I edit my web part here, this stuff up in the upper right-hand corner, this web part doesn't have very much, but these are the properties of your web part. So I like to keep the highest level, the parent form, the top parent, Really, all it is concerned about is we talk about good programming etiquette is, so the separation of concerns is it takes care of the properties. Now there's some other things you can do at this level as well and still keep your code pretty clean. But I don't usually like my code files to be over 100 lines long. Otherwise, they're just too hard to read. And the developer that comes after me is going to have a hard time understanding what's happening with that file. So, let's go back to the slides here. So what I've done, one of the things you can do is you can make a middle class, and this middle class can take care of your data and your business logic. So anytime you're connecting to a REST service, for example, you can put that sort of thing can happen in this middle tier class. And then you can separate your view or your presentation and put that in its own class. So that's another way to break it up. And so let's actually go ahead and do that. Let's see, I'm going to see how this video works here, because I don't have a good place to, so let's just try this video. If this doesn't work, we'll do it a different way. Okay, so here's my parent class. So I'm going to strip all of my presentation layer out of that, and I'm going to instead just put a reference to a child class and pass it some properties. And there's my definition of a custom web part property. So that's how I set up my parent class in this example. Any questions about that? Okay. Then, next thing I'm going to do, so another thing you can do is you can take your business logic and separate it from your data layer class. That's another way to break it up. As your project starts to become more and more complex, that's one way you can do it. So let's do that. So here's my data class. Again, I'm going to strip all of this stuff out that I want to put down in my presentation. And so I've already created my child class, my presentation class. I'm going to call that LDS search view. And I'm just going to import that. And then I can just strip out all of my markup in my JSX. And I can just say, show me, first I have to come up here and import that class. And then I can just say, all of the stuff that has to do with what the end user sees is going to be in this next class. So I'm going to create another. So this way I've got a parent that takes care of the properties. I've got the child, which of that parent, which is sort of this middle layer. And that's just going to take care of my data access and my business logic. And then I'm going to create a view that takes care of how this looks to the end user, the presentation. Okay. Then what you can start doing is you can break up your presentation layer, so you could have a different TSX file for different types of views that you want. And you saw earlier how I saw my search results, but I could say I want to see this, the people results related to this search string. Or I want to see the files related to this search string. So you can actually break that up into lots of different views. And that's just another way you can organize your code, like I said, as your solution becomes more and more complex. All right, so I'm actually going to go in here to the solution, not this one, this one. And we're going to look at a couple of things. So this is in one of the views. This is how I show people. And this is using Office UI Fabric React. And you can see I'm using persona. And that's how I got when you saw the people, you saw the nice little picture on the left, and then the information about that person on the right. So UI Fabric will take care of a lot of that if you import the persona class, and then you just plug some information into it like this. So this is one of the reasons you might want to use Office UI Fabric and Office UI Fabric React, because then you can do cool things like this. Okay, so let's look at the data tier for just a minute. And that we're going to find here, find it here. Okay, so this is how we're getting all this data. This is probably, if you want to build your own search web part, this is probably some of the most important stuff right here. So remember how I showed you we were getting results from our service catalog? So what I'm doing in my data business logic class is I'm saying if they've chosen to see this information in a catalog format, catalog results for this, then we're going to set things like the URL and what fields we want back. But the important thing to note here is the REST call that we are making to get that data back. So we're actually, in this case, pointing directly to a SharePoint site, service catalog, and then we pass in the search string, and then we pass in some other information, saying how many rows we want, and stuff like that. That's how we're getting stuff from a specific site. And then if I want people results, I'm going to create a different endpoint URL and pass in the search string and tell it to only show me people types, and try and see if there's anything in here that's important. And then I tell it what fields I want to get back. And this little field here, let's see if I can find it. It's called hit highlighted. Does anybody know what that does?
Yeah.
Yes, what is that?
That'll basically, if any of what you're searching for is matched in any of those properties, it'll give you those properties back.
Right.
So it'll give you the markup that has those highlighted items in it.
Exactly. So for example, out here on our site, if I search for something like my name, actually not sure if we've got it, so let's search for something else, and then we'll switch this over to files. Hit highlighted basically says this is why you're seeing these results, is because this has occurred, this search string has occurred in the document, and here's some examples, and it highlights that for you. It allows you to do that. Okay, so we're getting pretty close to being done. Let me just show a couple more things. So this is, that was people results that I just showed you here. These are just kind of your workforce search results. So this is going to return things like sites, pages, and documents. And so again, you construct your search query, and you put in whatever they've typed in their search string, and then you have to say a few other things, like which properties do I want back, which fields do I want back. That's these three lines right here. And then I want to say which properties do I want to highlight, and how many rows do I want to get back, etc. And then we just do our search like that. Okay, so any questions about how we did that? I know that was kind of high level. I didn't want to go too deep. How did I do?
You literally just told me.
Oh.
Hey, Darin.
Yeah.
What was your debugging experience like as you kind of built this and worked through it and discovered things, fixed things, adjusted along the way? Describe that part of the process.
So that's a great question. The question was, what was the debugging process like? And one of the wonderful things that I like with this whole tool chain is that as you're debugging, it will actually spin up your code in Node.js, and you can tell it. For example, I've got a few different debugging settings here. So I've got the intranet site, my own this site here. So I can say, I want to try this code. And what's lovely about this is I can put breakpoints in there. And then within this Visual Studio Code, I can actually, that would be a weird place to break. How about right here? I can actually break and observe my different variables as I do that. So I think it's pretty seamless. So let's actually see how easy it is. So I could come in here and I could say, let's debug this guy. And what it will do is it will run everything in localhost, but it's actually presented in the context of whichever site you set up. So I'm going to, even though this is running from localhost, I'm able to go out to my site. Let's see.
So the debugging passes through your authentication?
It does. So yeah, so this is my authentication right here. So I'm actually authenticating into the site. I'll use my Apple Watch to approve that. And
so you could authenticate as a test user too, right?
if you had test users set up as as part of your that can log in to have access to some site in SharePoint, then yes, you could authenticate as a test user. So notice this is kind of cool. I'm actually on my site, but all of my stuff is running. You can't really see this from the URL, but all this stuff is running in localhost. All of my code here. So let's go ahead and add. I must be stuck in a breakpoint somewhere. Let's see what's going on. No? Oh, you know why? Anybody see the mistake for a candy bar? How about this? This is a hint. Anybody see why I'm not able to see this in debug mode?
You haven't started serving yet.
So I'm not serving this up yet. So I need to come in here. I need to do something first. I need to say, hey, serve this up, Node. So this will take just a second.
It's interesting. Sometimes when you go to your live site, it'll actually give you a little pop-up.
Yeah, that's what I've seen.
This says
Says
you're not
hey,
running.
says
You're not running
serving.
anything. What do you
Yeah.
expect me to show? Okay, so this is actually going to run it up.
Darin's got the extra fancy version.
It doesn't prompt you.
You don't need no error messages.
Okay, this is still takes just a minute. Still running here. Still kind of doing a lot of stuff. Eventually, once you get this little prompt here, now notice I really am in localhost here, and I'm not in the context of my site right now. But now that it's running localhost, now I can come back out to my site where my debug session is attached, and I can. Is it already running, or did I close it down? I might have closed it down. So let's start it up again. So there I am on my site, and I can go out and I can add my web part that I am developing currently, that I have a breakpoint in, and I can add that to the page. And let's see, where did I put my breakpoint? When is it going to hit that? Okay, so it's going to hit it after it gets some search results. So let's just start to, now notice this, every single keystroke it's going out. This is, and by the way, these REST services that it's using as it hits Office 365, it's super fast. Have you guys done much development against those search REST services? They're fast. In fact, it's so fast that I can be typing, and every keystroke it's going to go out, and before I hit the next key, it's going to give me some pretty good results. So here I go. Finally, I've got my breakpoint here, and I can start looking at my variables, which is kind of cool. I don't have any items in my array right now, which I would expect because this hasn't actually made it out to the data layer yet. In fact, I think or maybe it's because that particular letter doesn't have any search results. Let's keep going. Yeah, see, there's nothing there. So let me turn off break. Let me turn off debug for just a second here. You know what I should have done is just taken my breakpoint out. Anyway, long answer to your question, is it Greg? Is it you the one that asked that? Is I think the development experience and the debug experience is excellent. Okay, what other questions do you guys have? Let me just go over a couple more slides here. So one thing you'll notice is my JavaScript doesn't look very much like JavaScript. That looks more to me, the first part of my career, I was a C# developer. And it looks a lot like C#, or it looks a lot more like C# than I'm used to for JavaScript. So anybody know how we're doing that? What's the magic there?
TypeScript.
TypeScript, yeah, exactly. So TypeScript allows you to do a few things. It gives you static typing. You can see your errors before they're runtime errors. You can actually see them in your integrated development environment or as things compile. I like it because it gives me a little bit more ability to do some object-oriented sorts of things that I could do in C#. Lets me do those things in JavaScript. Gives me IntelliSense. And at the end of the day, all it is at the end of the day, it transpiles, not compiles, but transpiles. It just makes it into just JavaScript that will run in any browser. Okay, so let's just give an example of that. So for example, if I've got my class here, and I wanted to create, so I like to keep my public stuff up at the top. Actually, constructor I like to be first, and then my public methods. So down below that, I'll just do it up here because it's easier. So let's just say I create a method in JavaScript language. This would be a function, but this is a method in TypeScript, and I could say do add this, and I could say I want, when you call this function or when you call this method, you need to give me a variable, and I'm going to say number to add. And at this point I can say, this has to be number. So if you pass me a string, when you call this from a different function, if I can see you're trying to pass me a string, I'm going to give you a compile time, or sometimes even an ID. It doesn't even have to compile. Your integrated development environment will just tell you you're trying to do something you shouldn't. So, and then you can say, what do you want to pass back? So I'm going to say I want to pass back a number. And then you write your function. Whoops, what did I do wrong there? Help me out.
Just hit that arrow.
What's that?
You're not returning anything.
Oh, is that the problem? Okay, and it doesn't like that. Okay. So then we can go and, we can say return, we need actually two numbers, right? Or let's say we'll call add 10 to this. Okay, so we're just going to say num to add plus 10. Now if I try to call this, say I just try this, call this from my main function or main method here, and I say, so let x equal do add 10 to this, and I did try to pass in a string. Oops. It's going to give me, even in my integrated development environment, even before I try to compile it, and compile time will also give me an error. But for sure, I'm going to get an error before runtime, right? So this is going to say, nope, sorry, you can't pass me a string. I expect a number. And then if I pass in number, it's okay with that. So I love that, because what was the JavaScript way is, hey, I'll take anything. Give me anything. I don't care. Just give me a variable. And so a lot of your errors would happen at runtime. And that's when you get your browsers freezing up and lots of things in your console saying, hey, this didn't work. But this allows you to trap that before that point. Okay, so I think we talked about that because I was talking about what's TypeScript and why would you want to use it. Any other questions about TypeScript or anything you guys have found that you really like?
Multi-line strings.
Multi-line strings.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Okay. It's harder to do with just JavaScript, right?
Yeah, I noticed when you're building your REST call, it's like plus blocks.
Yeah, exactly. So this sort of a thing in JavaScript, pure JavaScript would be nightmarish. So, okay, so I'm about done. I think that's all my slides. I'm going to talk a little bit about Office Fabric. We kind of already saw that. So let's just open it up for questions and answers. Any questions you guys have? Any questions from the internet?
None at the moment.
So Darin, what do you feel like is still missing
From
I'll say broadly SPFx?
Angular.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would love the Yeoman generator to have the ability to give you Angular, to just scaffold an Angular project for you. I think that would be terrific. It would sure make life much, much easier. I think that's coming. Like I said, Elements is part of Angular 5. The problem with Angular, putting Angular in SPFX is Angular likes to take control of the whole page. And specifically I'm talking about anything after Angular JS, so Angular 2, 3, 4. It likes to say, I want to own the whole page, and I want to own everything that's going on in the DOM. What Angular 5, specifically what Elements is going to do, is it's going to allow you to contain sorts of things, so Angular doesn't have the ability to take over the whole page. And I think that's why Microsoft, the church is part of the TAP program. We go up and meet with the development team, the folks who have worked, the actual people who are developing SharePoint Framework. We go up and meet with them occasionally. And they said that's why they haven't baked Angular into the Yeoman generator yet, is they're trying to get it to a place where they can do that. And then your web parts, so if you have that problem of Angular taking over the whole page, that wouldn't be an issue if you just had one web part on the page, right? Just the one web part that you wanted to add. And if you're doing a SPA, that might be the case. But the problem is if you add multiple Angular web parts on the page, it starts to mess things up and cause confusion. So I think that's why they haven't. I do think it's coming soon. What other things? I don't know. Let's just open that up to people. What other things do you think are missing from the SharePoint framework? What would you like to be able to do that you can't? Yeah.
Has anyone else tried to call out to a service that is secured by Azure Active Directory but not inside SharePoint? Like making lists from an SPFx web part into SharePoint and getting lists and libraries from internal, that's really, really easy. They give you the API to do that. You don't have to worry about authentication. But has anybody ever tried to call to a third-party service using the SharePoint credentials that you have, or the tokens that you have?
So when you say third-party service, are you talking about, so there's third-party service that's like outside of the Microsoft domain, and then there's third-party service that's in the Office 365 Microsoft domain kind of area. And there I'm talking about Delve, Graph, all these other things.
Yeah, I'm talking about is, like in our particular case, it's a custom service layer that we've built. We're securing it with Azure Active Directory, and so theoretically we thought it would be really easy just to grab the token that you have in SharePoint, throw it off onto our third-party service. But we're getting a lot of grief with that. It's not very seamless. There's a lot of pop-ups and a lot of double and triple authentication problems that we're running into.
But it's straight authenticating off of Azure AD.
Yeah.
You've done it.
Yeah, we've got some of our people done it with our own services secured by Azure AD as well.
Okay.
And did you do that just by registering the app in Azure Active Directory, and then so you actually follow the approach that's recommended, and then you're passing in as you make the first call, as you try to get the authentication tokens, cookies, all the headers, all that kind of stuff. You're passing in the stuff that you set up with your app registration, and it's still giving you grief.
Like when we try to do it automatically, like as the page loads, if we try to grab that information and pass out to our provider or whatever, it actually gets blocked by like pop-up blockers and saying, hey, you're trying to do a redirect, you can't do that, and it shuts us down. And the solution that we're using right now, which is not ideal, is that we wait for the page to load, and then we give them a big prompt that says, please click here to log in, and they have to wait for 4 seconds for the pop-up blocker thing to go away. And then they click here, and it does a little pop-up on the screen, and they don't actually have to type anything in there, but it does that little pop-up that takes you to the Office, or to the Microsoft authentication window. That closes back down, and then we have to essentially reload the web part again now that they've been authenticated. We haven't found a way to seamlessly do it yet.
Well, it sounds really painful.
Is that like a third-party pop-up blocker where you can use it?
No, just standard
browser, probably browser.
Standard browser, yeah. I'm just wondering if anybody's found a way to just load the SPFx and call out to a third-party service without having any user interaction.
Which, so you're using the actual Azure, you're using the Azure AD HTTP client from SPFx, right?
The Azure AD? No, we were using.
ADAL.js.
Yeah,
No,
we're using
ADAL.
ADAL.
ADAL, that's the problem. As part of the SharePoint framework, of the SharePoint framework version 1.4.1, they have included into it. They have built in, you can actually include as part of your package saying we need access to these APIs. And then when the admin deploys it, they can authorize it at that point in time, and then SharePoint's handling the authentication for you, so you don't have pop-ups.
So we need to get away from ADAL then.
Yes,
That's straight.
because ADAL does have that problem.
Yeah.
The user has to get involved.
Uh-huh.
The SharePoint framework, if you use it, they're handling the token gathering for you on the back end, so you don't have to handle them signing in and all the auth and that sort of stuff. The SharePoint's handling that for you.
Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, we're just manually grabbing the ADAL library and shoving it into the web part.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, good to know. Thank you.
Good question, excellent question. A lot of our integration so far has been SharePoint to SharePoint, but we have done some SharePoint to Graph and SharePoint to Delve and stuff like that. We haven't run into the same issues, but thank you for bringing that up. And it sounds like Journey team has done some of that. Zach has done some of that. So some good resources. Good, thank you. What else do you guys want to talk about? How are we doing on time? Are we okay? Did I go too long?
Okay. Which also usually at this point in time, we also have the open the floor to any questions. So even if it's not something relating to what Darin presented on, we'll let those have priority. But if you have other questions, feel free to go ahead and ask them at this point in time as well. So anything relating to SharePoint
Putting me on the
365.
spot.
Not for you to answer, it's for the
Oh,
whole
for
group.
everybody to
Yes.
answer. Oh, good, I like that.
I don't have anything this time.
Wow.
What have you done with the real pad?
Actually, I had something about 3 weeks ago, but I don't remember what it was. So we'll save it for next time.
Nobody else has anything. I got another one to throw out. Go for it. So when you were crafting your REST queries against that search API, you know, we were talking about the multi-line string and the million different fields that you were asking for or whatever. What is your preferred way to go figure out what fields are available to you and what are not? Because I found that in some cases, SharePoint doesn't support just the select splat, especially if you're trying to expand into related elements or child elements or something like that. And their documentation is just above garbage.
Yeah, abysmal. I would say abysmal.
It's better than it used to be.
Yeah.
That's why I say it's above garbage. Because
That's how we below garbage.
So here's how we did it. We were trying to figure out how to construct these REST queries because we weren't finding good documentation. So what we did was we opened up Postman, and we started going to these different Office 365 sites. So we were in Delve, we were in I'm trying to think of some other places that we went. Just in SharePoint, doing some just out of the box SharePoint searches using the out of the box. They don't have the web part yet, but they do have a search experience that's integrated into the product. And we just watched those in the Postman and just said, okay, that's interesting. Okay, so those are the fields that are available for people, or there's the fields that are available for files and stuff like that. And as we did, so it took a while. It was good. I was just sitting there in Postman for 2 or 3 days, just watching all these different calls, and that's sort of how I learned them. So that's what I would do.
Okay.
Good question. Anything else? Just another plug. We are looking for a SharePoint developer. So if you, we're growing our team. So if you know anybody who's interested in coming and working for the church, love it. Any other plugs from you, Brian? Or
I'll send you my resume.
great.
He's had enough fun with Kip already.
I'm a pretty strong dev, so.
We're excited about the merger, the Journey team and Soren. That's really cool. Good. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Have a great time.
Pretty exciting.
So there was one part there where I realized that I was showing phone numbers and I forgot to.
I realized shortly after as well.
Good. Okay.
So
Good.
there is a little bit where things are showing, but so I was watching Max, like I caught it here and then watching like that's maybe half a second.
Okay. Okay. Good.
So-
I think we're fine.
I was about to say, you can search me, it's okay, everyone has my
Yeah.
phone number probably.
As long as we're not showing like President